Mirrors have had legends, superstitions and myths tied to them for pretty much as long as they've been around. The ancient Romans believed they could reflect a person's soul and could bring great trouble if they were misused. And many cultures have various negative supernatural qualities attached to mirrors, such as they can suck out the soul of someone, be portals of death, or offer glimpses into some other dimension. The Chinese believe that what we see in mirrors are other realms of existence. In many cultures, mirrors are used for communication with spirits, and it's thought they serve as portals or doorways to the spirit world, that they are a barrier between the world of the living and the world of the dead. Mirrors are sometimes used in divination, where they are used to capture the reflection of the moon for the purpose of seeing into the future. It's through all this widespread belief that has led to the phenomenon of haunted mirrors, so common around the world that various cultures follow the superstition of covering mirrors at certain times, in particular after a death, in order to prevent whatever is on the other side from coming through, or even to stop a soul from becoming trapped within the mirror. Here are some stories of alleged cases of haunted mirrors. The first one begins back in 1817, when Sarah Matilda inherited her father's plantation, called the Myrtles Plantation, on the outskirts of Baton Rouge in Louisiana, along with her husband Clark Woodruff and their 3 children. With 20 rooms and its wraparound veranda, it looks almost like a fortress on top of a hill, and at the time it was bustling with activity, mostly done by slave labour. One of these slaves was a woman by the name of Chloe, who for many years fell victim to Woodruff's cruelty, including being beaten, verbally abused, and even having her ears cut off after being caught eavesdropping. She would wear a green turban to hide these injuries. By all accounts, Chloe had a rough time at the plantation, which would push her into the dark realm of thoughts on how to get revenge on her masters. When one of the Woodruff's daughters had her 9th birthday party, Chloe took her chance at revenge. While making the cake, she laced it with poisonous oleander leaves. Depending on who you ask, she did it either to outright kill the family or make them very sick so she could nurse them back to health and increase her standing. Whatever the case may be, the dose was lethal enough. It killed Sarah and her daughter. When it was found out that Chloe had been the one to carry out the poisoning, it was strangely the other slaves who would turn against her for giving them a bad name. They tied her up, hanged her, then tossed her lifeless body into the Mississippi River. However, Chloe doesn't seem to have ever really left. Ever since her death, the Myrtles Plantation has been absolutely plagued with paranormal activity. Most of it said to be caused by Chloe, and one of the things associated with the activity is the haunted mirror at the plantation. A large mirror hangs in the main hall, and guests have reportedly seen not only Chloe, complete with her green turban, but also the spirits of the murdered Mrs. Woodruff and her daughter, as well as the spirits of other people who have been murdered at the house during its dark history. There are often voices heard, crying, and even screams coming from the mirror, and it has a disturbing habit of distorting the images reflected in it. There are also handprints that routinely appear on the mirror, even though no one is allowed to touch it. And another creepy feature is that it is sometimes reported that the wallpaper reflected in the mirror is not the same as what is actually on the walls. Another early account of a haunted or cursed mirror goes back to the 20th century and the well-known actor Bela Lugosi. In his time he was known for portraying Count Dracula in the horror classic Dracula, produced in 1931, Igor in Son of Frankenstein in 1939, as well as his roles in many other horror films from 1931 to 1956. Besides being a famous actor in his time, Bela was also heavily into the occult and the world of psychic powers, such as ESP and clairvoyance. One of his odd practices was gazing at inanimate objects for long periods of time, a practice known as scrying, in particular using a grand mirror that he owned in order to receive messages from the spirits. When Bela Lugosi died, his house was bought by criminal lawyer and part-time producer, director, writer and actor Frank Selettri, who was mysteriously murdered in the room where the mirror hung. The mirror now hangs in the museum of Ghost Adventures host Zak Bagans, where it shows ghostly images and has been claimed to cause adverse physical reactions in those who stare into it, to the point that it has even been claimed that 911 had to be called in the past. Another supposedly cursed and haunted mirror in the possession of a paranormal museum is the Dark Mirror. Owned by Greg Newkirk and his Travelling Museum of the Paranormal, one of the most terrifying stories of a supposed haunted mirror in modern times revolves around a type of mirror used for scrying. One form of scrying involves the use of what is called a black mirror, essentially a mirror that has had its surface coated with black paint to make it solid dark. If someone knows what they're doing, they can supposedly go into a trance and gaze into the black surface, where spirits will appear to them and even communicate with them. Similar to a Ouija board, it's considered by some to be a rather dangerous way to contact the spirit world, as the black mirror is said to act sort of like a portal, and there is very little one can do to control what comes in or out of it. Those who have used black mirrors have complained of having migraines or other health issues, seeing demons, having violent, vivid nightmares, and experiencing paranormal activity. These black mirrors are generally not to be used by the inexperienced. It's one of these black mirrors that one day came into the possession of the Travelling Museum of the Paranormal and the Occult, and the story of how they acquired it is quite strange. According to Greg Newkirk, owner of the museum, they were approached one day by a woman called Sarah, whose mother had purchased a mirror at a scrying event for psychics. According to Sarah, her mother then became obsessed with using the mirror at all hours, constantly in a trance gazing into it, to the point it had become very worrying. Sarah asked her mother if she could see the mirror and found it had been covered and locked away in a cupboard. The mother called it evil. Not knowing what to do with it, Sarah then called the Newkirks and offered to donate it to the museum in order to get it off their hands for good. The Newkirks put it in their collection, and considering it was surrounded by other various haunted or cursed objects, they really didn't think much about it. However, this particular object would prove to be far more than they bargained for. Things started to get weird when they put it on public display for the first time at a paranormal event. A visitor came forward wanting to try it out. The owners usually allow museum guests to touch or try out various objects on display at their own risk, and so they let the woman come and take a look. She took one look in the mirror and then slammed it down with a terrified expression, claiming that she had seen her own decomposing corpse staring back at her, leaving in a distraught state before she could be questioned further. This prevented almost anyone else from trying it out, and the mirror started to be called the Dark Mirror for the rest of the event and from then on. Some were brave enough to try it and had similar volatile experiences from it, saying they saw all manner of horrific things inside the mirror. Greg Newkirk decided it was best to stop allowing people to use it for the time being, so that he could figure out what was going on. He himself refused to look into the mirror as he was starting to suspect that the object was potentially very powerful and dangerous. He claimed that he had the distinct feeling that it was drawing him to it. He said,
"The mirror wasn't quite the same when we brought it home, or maybe I wasn't. After we had unpacked our collection and returned the items to their usual places, I began to notice myself staring off into space, and when I snapped back, I realized I have been staring at the uncovered mirror the whole time. I started to feel a strong urge to gaze into the black glass. Maybe I was subconsciously creeped out by the disturbing reports of those who had gazed into it, but I couldn't shake the feeling that the mirror wanted me to use it. Whether it was my own mind playing tricks on me or not, I resisted."
The dark mirror was soon put back on display, and people were once again allowed to gaze into it, although they were warned against it, and more reports of strange experiences with it were told. Some people saw nothing at all. Others saw twisted shapes, black masses, or demonic figures. Others saw their own reflection, but deformed, withered, distorted, or dead. And some saw visions that were so horrific they had panic attacks. Some of the witnesses looking into the mirror would jump back in horror, describing seeing what looked like venomous spiders filling the whole thing up. And these included people who were at first highly skeptical. Some of these witnesses also described feeling a sort of electrical current flow through them as they held the mirror. Headaches, dizziness, and in one case, a woman who said her mouth had filled with a taste of blood. Animals would not go near it either. The Newkirk's own cat would hiss and spit at it and then run away. Every night the mirror would be covered, only to find the cover was removed the next morning. When the Newkirk set up a camera, which they aimed at the mirror every night, the footage on the memory card was mysteriously erased every single time. These incidents with the mirror continued and seemed to get more intense as time went on. Paranormal investigators who came to look at it saw all manner of frightening things. To make things worse, Greg Newkirk has claimed that the mere presence of the mirror seems to magnify the properties of the other haunted objects in their possession. And all of this was enough to make them decide to take the mirror off display and keep it tightly wrapped and locked away in a chest with a crucifix and rosary. Greg gave his own thoughts on the matter.
After coming into possession of the dark mirror and watching hundreds of people have their own terrifying experiences while using it, it's our belief that the object isn't exactly haunted as such, but an object that seems to feed on human interaction, even fear. In the beginning, the dark mirror was just another object with an intriguing story behind it, but as we began to feed it a steady stream of freaked-out people in haunted locations across the country, it became pretty easy to see the mirror was affected by the attention. It took Sarah's mother several weeks of regular, individual scrying sessions for her interactions with the mirror to come to a head. But for 3 months, we were giving it a constant stream of people, which gave it all the energy it needed. It's as if the dark mirror is acting as a kind of battery. After each event, the phenomena that the mirror exhibits gets a little harder to ignore, leading me to believe that by allowing the brave and curious to gaze into the mirror, we are changing it, giving its battery a more powerful charge.
Through all of this, Greg has refused to look into the mirror himself, and after keeping it locked away for some time, it has gone on the road again for display, kept locked in its chest when not in use. Whether showing it again is a wise move or not remains to be seen, but there seems to be more than enough people who will risk trying it out. So on to the next story. This happened to a man who said he was staying in a haunted B&B in upstate New York that dates back to 1845. Inside this old building is a mirror that is very active with paranormal phenomena. The man said,
"The mirror in question is an old Victorian style, which just happened to come from an old Victorian home just down the street from the B&B. The owners of the mirror had been having strange things happen. Odd lights would come in and out of the mirror, and they would see unknown faces gazing back at them. Growing more and more uncomfortable with these creepy sights, it was decided to take the mirror down the street and see if the owner of the B&B would like to give it a good home. They were truthful in why they wanted to get rid of the mirror. They were happy to accept the gift. The antique mirror was hung in a place of honor in what is known to be the most haunted room in the building. It was placed on top of an old dresser, which was already in the room. It was decided they would just leave the mirror to its own devices and wait to see what, if anything, would happen without mentioning it to their guests. It didn't take long before the mirror started to show signs of strange activity. Things started small at first, with odd balls of light moving round the edges, but over time the energy began to increase, and what seemed to be faces started to appear.
The man decided to get some people together and try mirror divination to try and communicate with whatever spirit is using the mirror as a portal. The hotel apparently has quite a few spirits roaming round, including several child spirits and a murdered gang boss. It was thought that at least a few of these spirits might be using the mirror as a gateway to enter the hotel, so they arranged a ritual to try and contact them through it. He said,
A group of 6 people proceeded to the haunted room to try our luck with the divination. The first volunteers to step up had some success when the reflections seemed to change as their faces appeared to get older. After a few minutes, someone suggested I give it a go. I have never tried anything like this before, and immediately agreed to take a turn. Only a few minutes passed before changes began to take place. The first thing to occur was my hair, which was very long at the time. It seemed to be getting shorter, and my face began to transform into female features. As I stood motionless in front of the mirror, with 5 witnesses seated on the bed to my left, the transformation proceeded. Over the next few minutes, the image of my reflection made the change from a 58-year-old man to that of a young teenage girl. Everyone in the room was fascinated with the strange image in the mirror as the young girl became more and more clear, but no one was prepared for what happened next. Everyone was sitting quietly transfixed on the image, while I stood motionless, staring straight into the mirror, not moving a muscle. Suddenly, the image of the young girl turned and looked straight at the people on the bed, and her mouth began to move as if trying to talk to them. It was at this point when some of the group became very uncomfortable and started to leave. The session then came to an end when the face disappeared.
In another account, we have what seems to be some sort of shadow person using the mirror as a portal. The witness was in his bedroom one night, which has a full-length mirror, when he saw a tall figure in black clothing and a Quaker hat staring back at him. The figure then proceeded to step out of the mirror. The entity was described as having glowing red eyes, and after stepping out of the mirror, it floated along the floor around 3 inches off the ground. No feet could be seen. He looked totally physical, like a living human being. The man was fully awake. This was no dream. The being asked the man if he would like to join them. He said he was meant to be the man's spirit guide for life, and if he joined them, he would receive all of the material things he could ever wish for. Fame as a movie star, immense riches, the wife of his dreams, everything that he had ever desired he would get. The man refused to go with the shadow figure and ordered him to go back into the mirror and return to where he came from. The figure hesitated for a few seconds, then walked backwards into the mirror. After that, the man smashed it to pieces and threw the shards of glass out, far away from his home. The final account of haunted mirrors comes from a lady named Lucy, who said that her sister Sally had moved to a house that had quite a lot of paranormal activity. Shadowy apparitions, light bulbs exploding for no reason, disembodied footsteps and terrible odours. It got to the point where she could not sleep in the house alone and finally decided to move out of the place. It then became apparent to her why the place was so haunted. Sally began moving all her furniture into the family home. A lot of the furniture belonged to both her grandparents and the previous tenants. One of these items was a big oval mirror with a white frame. It was being stored in the hallway of the family home for the time being, along with some other furniture. One day Lucy was sitting in the living room with Sally when they heard a loud crash coming from the hallway. When they both went to look, they found their father standing there looking at a pile of smashed glass on the floor. Sally asked what had happened, and he said the mirror broke. It just collapsed. He cleaned up the glass and asked Sally if she wanted to keep the frame. He also found a piece of paper behind the glass. It was a news article from 1985 about a football match. However, the whole article was written in Italian. Lucy asked where the mirror had come from. Had it belonged to their grandparents or a previous tenant, or did Sally buy it herself? Sally said she found it in the attic. She took it down, painted it, and hung it in her bedroom. Her father told them it belonged to the mother of the last tenant, Maria. Maria loved to go travelling and had accumulated a lot of stuff from different places. She stored a lot of this stuff in the attic, but forgot to take the mirror when she moved out. After speaking to someone with knowledge of the paranormal, they were told the mirror had been haunted. What the newspaper cutting had to do with it, no one could figure out. But the spirit who used the mirror as a portal was the spirit haunting the house while Sally was there. When it was moved, the spirit got annoyed and so smashed the mirror to pieces. So, very spooky stuff. There is a belief among the paranormal community that it's always best to get rid of any mirrors left behind by previous tenants to stop what happened to Sally happening to you. The mirror might be perfectly harmless, of course, but why would anyone leave something that is antique behind? Stories of haunted mirrors are numerous. There are many strange paranormal occurrences that are blamed on them, so much so that a lot of paranormal investigators will cover up mirrors or perform a cleansing ritual on them if they are in the same room of a location they are investigating. But are haunted mirrors just a myth, or the imagination of people who look into them and see strange and creepy things? Or are spirits truly drawn to them, and are they really gateways to another world? Whatever the answer may be, mirrors will always continue to be used by some to try and get contact from the spirit world. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.